complete.
I think because Mr. Castillo decided to grace us with his presence early, we would love to bring him in. Like I said, all politics begins and ends at the local level. So without further ado, very happy to bring on my city commissioner, Angelo Castillo. Good evening, sir.
How are you?
We're doing great. Make sure, I think your volume may need to go up just a little bit.
Or where's your mic?
Yeah. I love the study. It looks very peaceful.
That's my den.
Oh, very nice.
Our volume.
I think that's good.
Too.
Yes,
okay.
that sounds great.
This is where I do my work.
Well, you know what? Everyone needs a man cave, as far as I'm concerned. So if that's where you can keep some fresh thoughts in the head and get stuff done, I like that peace and quiet. So that does look very tranquil, and the couch looks amazingly comfortable. So that definitely works out.
What's going on? How you guys doing?
We're doing good.
Yeah. I mean, this is what we ultimately did with our platform. So for people who don't know, Commissioner Castillo was, at the time during campaigning, was essentially a fellow candidate. At one point, it felt like along this, and Angelo was a commissioner previously and then ran again recently. And so we were traveling in the same campaign circles, and he was camped out outside of the voting locations. And so we got to bond a little bit.
Always came prepared.
Always very prepared.
Had the ice cold water, had
very
the umbrellas.
Yeah.
Traveling no different than you would if you were traveling like on a camping trip. Was very sharp.
And what I found interesting, Angelo, is that so many people that would come by to vote, they knew you personally.
Yep.
Like, it was so clear, like you really are the commissioner that people know.
Well, I've been at it for a while, and there's a lot to be said for returning every phone call, returning every email, not taking people for granted. I'm not a perfect person, but I return every call and I return every email, and I get right back to folks when they contact you. And when somebody calls you, and if you're an elected official and somebody calls you with a problem, that's a serious problem. That takes a lot to contact someone in authority. And so I think it's important that that when you're contacted, you listen very carefully to what this person has to say, because it's important to them. And if you can help them, that's what you're under oath to do. So, and I do that in English and Spanish, and I do it even for lots of folks who don't live in Pembroke Pines but need someone who they can speak to in their own language. And it's always been a labor of love for me. I never find it. I never feel put out by it. And sometimes I can help them, and sometimes I can't. But I always give them an honest answer.
Yeah.
I really think that more than anything that I've seen at the local level, like you said. I'm from New Jersey. I understand that there are people that, see our way of doing things is not exactly everyone's cup of tea. We move at a faster pace in many ways, and that's not exactly the type of pace that people in South Florida necessarily like. But for me, for Jen, for anybody who has embraced this political movement in the last few years, recognizes that politics is supposed to be about a term of service, not a career. If you are an elected representative at any level, city commission is one of the most important positions in all of politics, because you really are dealing with your constituency on a day-to-day basis. And there is a certain amount of obligation that I think comes with that. And you embrace that. And I notice, especially online, you're very open about having Facebook thread forums, asking questions of the local constituents. I need to know why we don't have more representatives like you that want to engage their constituency. If we had more people, regardless of, like you said, you may not be everybody's cup of tea, but you're never going to have to question your work ethic and whether or not you're representing your people, because that is something.
I think for me it's very, very simple. I had a full and beautiful life before I was in elected service, and I will have a full and beautiful life when it's over. But while I'm there, I refuse to be anyone other than who I am, and that's just that simple. There's some folks, elected office is a magnifying glass, and whoever you really are, it magnifies that. And that, I've maybe it's just, I don't know how to be a different guy than who I've always been. So what I do is I have a Facebook page that I've had it for the last 11 years, and I end every entry with the word discuss, and I do that on purpose in order to get people talking. It's incredibly important that folks should talk, but it's also important that they should listen. And I, in particular, go out of my way to make sure that the people who I accept as friends, you only get 5,000 of them, sort of spread out across the political spectrum. I want ultra conservatives on that page. I want ultra liberals on that page. I want moderates on that page. I want independents on that page. I want folks who are married. I want young folks. I want divorced folks. I want seniors. I want the gay community. I want the straight community. I want blacks. I want Hispanics. I want every possible religion that I can get, every possible ethnicity, so that I can have a conversation with them in a public forum where no subject is barred. We've talked about abortion on my page, and nobody seems to, get angry with one another, because one of the things that I do is moderate. And I say, look, you can have different views, but let's not call each other names. Continue, discuss. And we just move on with the conversation. And rare is the opportunity that I have to get involved in that kind of thing. And I think people like the idea, for such small amounts of folks as I have, they like the idea of having a place where they can go and just chat about things that are important to them. No subject is barred and no viewpoint is barred. And I think it's important. And I learn from all of them.
Yeah, I think that's important. And you represent all of those types of people. Like there's a very broad category of people that you would otherwise not know that you represent. I mean, I think it's important.
People take it for granted. I mean, obviously I have my own political party preference, but I run nonpartisan.
Right.
So I have to campaign. Every person's vote is important to me. I don't run in primaries or anything like that. I have to represent everyone in a city. There are people who have very serious policy differences, and I have to find a way to do that around services that are probably among the more, not to use a dramatic term, intimate that you can have as a constituent. Your garbage, your water, the police that come to your house, the firefighters that come to your home, your parks, education for kids, roads, just day-to-day stuff that it's not so much issues, but it's services.
Yeah. Well, because you consider it a service, but there are big issues, and one of the things that we notice, obviously in South Florida, is overdevelopment. Yeah. And the toll that's taking on our infrastructure and on the environment, which is intersectional, and how to balance that. And I was saying to Peter before, I live in Davie, and there's a reason I live in Davie. And it's like Davie has the green space that it has because of Davie and how Davie is run, whereas places like Sunny Isles are a concrete village. So it's just like, where do you strike the balance? And Pines is a very growing, very populous city, with and a lot of multifamily housing, and it gets very crowded and the traffic is crazy. And so how do you balance development with sanity?
Well, I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different people in government from a lot of different backgrounds. My own background, after I got out of law school, it was to work in local government. And I did that for 40 years. I just recently retired. But I was a local government executive for 40 years. I got to work for 3 New York City mayors, 2 governors. I worked at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development under 2 presidential administrations. I was the human services director for Broward County. I ran a nonprofit for about 10 years, and I also worked at the sheriff's office. So I as an executive, I had a pretty good tour of duty and saw a lot of different kinds of things. But my core disciplines always were, apart from the management of budgets and administration, health, human services, housing, community development. All of those things were in the core of what I did. And there's a concept, a program within community development called Smart Growth, and it's not just a tagline or a cliche. What it means is that a development should be more benefit than burden. And the way that you make development more benefit than burden is by doing it sustainably. So if you're going to build homes, or if you're going to build commercial, you have to have the traffic infrastructure so that the quality of life can be there. You have to have a footprint that allows for sufficient green space. You have to have the water that's necessary in order to be sustainable. Smart growth are principles that one uses in order to help keep the quality of life, not just for the environment and for visitors, but also for residents, high. And by and large, over the years, Pembroke Pines has been pretty successful. Not as I'm not putting us up as a poster child, but pretty successful compared to other cities in developing that. We have a lot of acres per capita, in relatively speaking, in terms of open space. But traffic has been a main concern of ours. And the reason that traffic is a main concern is twofold. One, because our city has a great deal of commercial. We are one of the main, Pines Boulevard is one of the main commercial corridors in South Florida. It is a coveted place if you are a store or a visitor of stores. So that's a source of traffic. But secondly, our people are, I don't know that it would be a fair characterization to say that we're an upper income area, but we're a better than average income area, and we have many cars. And the planning paradigm that was created in the 1980s, which to this day there are elements of it that are playing out, where kids would be on bicycles or school buses going off to school. This sort of happy leave it to Beaver kind of mantra never really played out in Pembroke Pines. Kids at 15 have their own car very often in this city, and seniors, God bless them, are living late into their 90s and past 100.
Yes.
And they're driving, and they're driving safely. So you have many cars on the road. And if you're going to continue to build, you have to mitigate your traffic. Now, we have a project, several projects that are needed right now, much less any new building. And the city of Pembroke Pines has been dragging its feet, making excuses, not being aggressive enough in pursuing the completion of those projects. And one of them is the Pembroke Road completion out to US 27. Pembroke Road currently ends at 196th Avenue, and it needs to extend by another about half mile in order to be able to get to US 27. Once that happens, we will have a third, very much needed, completed east-west artery to carry traffic. Miramar, you should know, can't get to US 27 unless it goes through Pembroke Pines. They should be able to get to US 27 without having to come up Pines Boulevard or worse, Sheridan. So there are two cities that need that project. Well, we had planned to get it done as quickly as last year, and it just has been dragging on. Now the engineers tell me that at best it can't get done until 2027. But the problem is that there are proposal after proposal to build hundreds of townhomes in Pembroke Pines additionally to over and above what we have. Now, I understand that not everyone likes the idea of townhome, but let me tell you, townhomes are selling like crazy. And in Pembroke Pines, if you build the townhome community, before you put in the first brick, you're probably going to be sold out. That's how fast people and how much people want to live in this city. And I understand that there's great demand. But the thing about residential traffic is, it impacts on the worst possible time, rush hour. Commercial traffic is actually a little bit more than what you'd get with residential, but it's spread out over the day. Residential traffic is focused on rush hour, and that's when we have our peak problem. And it's just impossible for us to get this thing done. I don't understand. And
why?
I think it's become political.
Silly.
And to tell you the truth, it's gotten to where when I got back after my other campaign and the residents asked me to continue serving, I just started voting no. And so if they're not going to mitigate their traffic, I'm going to vote no. There's another commissioner who joins me in voting no. So right now we're at a 3-2 situation, and we're seeing more and more 3-2 situations because we're not doing the things that we need to do. This is a city that's starting to see more crime. This is a city that's starting to see more traffic. This is a city that's starting to see more issues with in need of other infrastructure. This is a city whose fees and taxes are starting to go up. We used to be the city that our motto was can do. We were the city that can, that did, and that cared. Right now, I think we still care, but I believe we still can, but we're not doing it. And so long as that's the case, I'm voting no.
I do think, if you look at the way the road extends out, what that main road is up in Sunrise to the main highway, or I think I don't know if it's 27, but the one that's off of Broward Boulevard.
Yeah.
But that's an area that I think is a very similar situation that Angelo.
That's not anywhere near 27.
No, what
that's
I'm saying,
so far east of 27.
But what I'm saying is that because of the way the roads extend, Pembroke Pines and Sunrise have very similar east to west type roads, and because of this massive traffic buildup that's happening there, it would seem to me that building out to 27 off of Pembroke Road makes so much sense on so many different levels, obviously from a jobs perspective, from a traffic perspective, from an environmental perspective.
I don't understand why
I don't get it. I don't get it.
If they want their townhouses. So it seems.
I don't get it. I don't get it. And
is there anything that we can do?
Wasn't too long ago, the county came to all of the cities, and we all helped the residents to understand it. And they said, "Come on, let's chip in and get this traffic thing done." And we decided to go for this penny tax, and we voted it in so that And I understand that we've had COVID and whatnot, but people need work, and construction. This is the perfect time to do it. And I just don't understand what the delays are. But if they can't explain to me, if the answer is let's build the townhomes and 2027 is the current estimate.
That's pathetic in and of itself.
Notorious for pushing out their deadlines. So I think that we have to go back to what the rule is on smart growth. You mitigate your impacts as you build. So that once people move in, the impact's already been mitigated and your quality of life can continue. Well, our city used to do those things, and we're not doing it anymore. I remember when Pines and Flamingo, I mean, you say you're from Jersey. Let me tell you, they used to say that Pines and Flamingo were the most dangerous.
It was. And there were 2 intersections in Pines in the top 5.
Well, I'd like to take them to Queens and show them a couple places like near where I used to live, but it doesn't matter. It took us a year of planning and implementation, and we put in the additional turning lanes, and we did the things that we had to do to Pines Boulevard, and suddenly that intersection wasn't there anymore. Why? Because we cared, because we can, and because we did it. That's how it's supposed to be.
I don't understand the connection between extending the road to 27 and having townhouses. Why can't you do both of those things?
It could be. I'm voting no because they're saying that we have to wait way too much in order to get the road done. And
so they're wanting to put in the townhouses without adding the road extension.
And all it's going to do is make traffic worse.
It's going to make it much worse.
We need the extension to US 27 now, even without the townhouses. So all this is going to do is add more traffic in the morning without any relief. And I'm not willing to vote for that.
No,
I'm not going to do it. So I know it's annoyed some people, but the residents have been very supportive of my view. There's another commissioner, as I say, that has been supportive of us, and she's voting with me on this issue. And I'm hoping that we can get one more of the commissioners to, though they all live out east, to see it the right way, and hopefully we can get this thing going.
How can we, because we've built obviously a grassroots organization that focuses on these types of issues.
We need people to reach out to the commissioners and say that they want the road extended.
Oh, absolutely. But if there are any other ideas, we're certainly open.
Well, I mean, the idea is leadership. There was a time when we didn't take no for an answer in Pembroke Pines, not just because we're Pembroke Pines, but because we were relentless and because we were right. And when you're right and you have a job to do, you don't take no for an answer. Look, I mean, we can always make excuses for mediocrity, but that's not what my city is supposed to be about. My city is supposed to win for the residents. We work for them, not the other way around.
Correct.
So if we work for them, then we have to do something better than say, "Oh shucks, we couldn't get it done." That's unacceptable, and it's never played a role in my book, and that's why folks say hello to me, because
yeah, no, I think you're right. So we need people who live in Pines to be contacting your commissioner and telling them that you want this road to be extended, that it's already too much traffic, and that there should not be building more townhouses until that happens.
Well, definitely.
No. Right.
Yeah. No, we definitely have some ideas we'll discuss.
Yeah.
That we think could
help
potentially mitigate this issue. And Angelo, I think that's a great transition, because as you have obviously seen, as we have seen over the past 5 years, and this obviously relates to, some of the hypertensions that have existed, especially with the recent city commission race. Can you talk about how detrimental this hyper-partisan divide that we are living in today, where people are literally at each other's throats? They are not trying to find any reason to find common ground. It's like, you're on that side, I'm on that side, and that's it. The line's in the middle, and I ain't crossing it no matter what. It's a little bit it's sort of like an out of body kind of an experience for me, because I turned 62 this year. I know it doesn't quite look that way. Definitely not.
I turned 62 this year, and for most of my life, I lived in an America that's decidedly different than the one we have today. I haven't really looked at even one day in the current century as being even close to the America that I remember. And there was always a partisan divide. And you go back historically, and it's a partisan divide. But there was a line that was drawn: family, country, faith. There were certain lines that were drawn. And from there on, we were required to come together and solve these problems. You'd have folks on the far left and on the far right making arguments, and they were required to go into a room, close the door, and then they'd come out with a deal, because that's what nobility in government is about. Sometimes you don't get the whole thing, you don't get the whole loaf, but you come out with a solution, and tomorrow you go at it again. And the next day you go at it again. And sometimes the best you can do is come up with a solution that's 80%, but that's a win for everybody, because most people are in the middle. Most people see the benefit when folks are arguing and on either side. Most people don't want to be overtaxed. Most people want a government to work, but they don't want to see misery on the streets. They don't want to see homeless people. They don't want to see kids that can't afford to go to the doctor. There's no place for that in the United States. So we have heart tugs from the right and the left, the majority of people are sort of there in the middle. And that includes a whole bunch of Democrats, and includes a whole bunch of independents, and a whole bunch of Republicans. It's not a question of the label. It's a question of what's in your heart. My parents are a perfect example. My entire family was Republican. But if you'd ask them, is it right that people shouldn't have health insurance? They'd say absolutely not. Nobody should be in a position where they can't do that. Should it be that you can't afford to go to college? What do you think about 13% interest on a student loan? They would say that's outrageous. And we have situations like that. And I don't see why government can't play a role in dealing with those issues. It's capriciousness to say that government can't deal with it. Of course we can. We've done it more than once. But if your viewpoint is to sort of place a caricature, if you will, on the argument of my friends on the right, if you feel that there's a certain Darwinism that exists, that as Governor Cuomo used to say, not the current one, his father,
Mario.
He used to say the other side feels that the wagon train can't get all the way out west unless the weak are thrown off the train. Survival of the fittest, a certain Darwinism exists. He says, well, on our side of the aisle, we believe that the wagon can make it all the way with the family intact, and we've done it more than once. He's right. You go back in history, and you see people like Franklin Roosevelt raising himself out of a wheelchair to kill Nazism and the horrible threat in the world. And now we see kids running around, with swastikas and whatever. They don't even know what they're talking about. You got people calling things socialism. They don't even know what socialism is.
Right.
And the way that word is being thrown around. There's no reason why you can't be a good capitalist and not be a harsh son of a bitch. You don't have to be. You don't have to be. You don't have to be the kind of person who has to tread on who has to live on the misery of others in order to be a capitalist. That's not what good capitalism is about. We used to have companies that took care of their workers. And they cared about their workers. Yeah. And now that's all falling apart. So you asked me a question, what's going on? Now I can also talk to you about how paradoxical it is that in today's day and age, we're surrounded with information because of the internet. And yet we have never had a more misinformed population than we have right now. Exactly. And it's because you just don't know who to believe. There wasn't much about Trump and his rhetoric that I liked, but he there is such a thing as fake news. The problem is he was behind a lot of it, but there is such a thing as fake news, and you hear fake stuff on the right and the left. Where are the ethics in journalism to make sure that we get the straight story so we can make up our own minds? I don't need anyone telling me how to think. You don't need anyone telling you how to think. Just give me the facts so that I have the tools to use my own mind and reach my own conclusion. Well, so that's why I think these arguments get pent up, and then it becomes a capricious fight of, no, you're not gonna outsmart me, or you're not gonna win over me. So it becomes like color wars. It's childish and stupid. And what it does is it inevitably puts nation, family, and faith second to other considerations, and that's not America at its best. That's America at its worst. We need to stop doing that.
I think that that's a great transition, Angelo, because Jen and I both agree that the biggest problem that we face in the political arena is corporate special interest money have completely usurped the democratic process. It is very difficult past what you have done, which has been, like I said, remarkable in terms of your ethic to get out there and meet as many people, knock on as many doors, and that has proven to be fruitful. Not everybody's doing that or willing to do that, but I do think that corporate money has completely corrupted the political system. That includes the information, as you alluded to, that we get when it comes to our news, when it comes to the politics of divide and conquer. And frankly, we see it with a lot of our elected officials down here, whether it be local, state, or federal. And I do think that that issue, probably more than any other, is what has created this massive divide, because there is somewhat of a citizens' uprising that's happening. People are aware that something's wrong, but they're getting a whole bunch of bad information in terms of why that is. What's been your experience like dealing with, let's say, the land developers who will just stuff as much money as possible into candidates or elected officials' coffers?
How do you stay clean? How do you keep it so that you're serving people and not special interests and corporate interests, which is down here mostly it's developers, or fossil fuel or whatever.
If you read the Matthews book on Tip O'Neill, who was a great Speaker of the House,
yes.
Speaker O'Neill used to talk about how money was the mother's milk of politics, and how the only way to be a good public servant was to be an ingrate and get away with it. I'll be honest with you. I've run probably about 10 campaigns now, and I've collected an awful lot of money, and I've never felt once that I wasn't free to vote my conscience. And sometimes I agree with the business community, and sometimes I don't. But you can always be honorable about it. I think the business community, what they want in an elected official isn't just someone who votes for them, but who will return phone calls and tell them the truth. If you tell somebody, look, I can't be with you on this one because of X, Y, and Z, they can respect that and move away. Now, some of them will say, well, then then I can't support you. And if that's their view, well, then you part company, because that's what ethics requires. But I've actually now, some folks will say, well, he's lying. I'm not lying. I've never come across that problem. I've just never come across the problem. I can talk to someone who I disagree with and explain myself in terms of why, and if they really, really feel that they don't want to be associated with me anymore, that becomes their choice, not mine. But campaign finance reform only works if there's public financing of campaigns, because campaigns have to be paid for. The handouts and the radio ads and the TV ads and your staff and everything, there are costs associated with that. So unless we're going to go to an oligarchy where only the rich can afford to run and fund themselves, or unless there's going to be public financing of campaigns,
well, that's what we support,
which exists at the federal level, but doesn't exist anywhere else. And here's the problem: that would actually work across the board in government. People think that it would cost them money, and that would actually save them a ton.
Yes.
Here's the problem. The problem is, Counselor, is you've got the First Amendment, and the way that it's being interpreted right now is not only a difficult political argument, but it's a difficult one to defeat. The truth of the matter is, we tax corporations in our system. We would never be able to afford to live in this country if we didn't tax corporations.
Correct.
So they feel that they have a voice to share in return for the taxes that they pay.
Yeah,
they're being taxed without representation.
Yeah,
and
they're
so,
not people. See, that I disagree with that decision.
Okay.
I actually don't think that they are people, and I think that's a problem.
We were taught in law school that corporations are persons, but I understand what you're saying. I see the room for reform, but only if people decide that this is what they want to do. There are three things that we need to do to make a better democracy, And one of them is decide what we're going to do with campaign financing. The second thing is have absolute and totally open ability on everyone's part to vote. And the third thing is to deal with districting. If we did those three things, and if we did those three things well, you would have people elected who would not be beholden to anyone but who elected them, coming from districts that wouldn't slant viewpoint either ideologically or on any other scale. They would simply represent blocks of contiguous, connected, let's call them, areas of interest, and people would be voting in high numbers. Until something along those lines happens, ours is going to be a challenged society. But the Constitution tells us that our job is to create a more perfect union, and I think that in that acknowledgement, the founders are telling us that what they created wasn't perfect. And this assumption that the original Constitution is sort of like the Bible. No, this was a bunch of guys who happened to own land in the late 1700s who were in a very sweaty room and had to come up with something. Now, bless their brilliance, they came up with an amazing document that has held this country together in large parts for a long time. But they had to make some horrifying compromises in that document. I won't mention them all, but some of them were very horrifying.
Oh yes.
And our job is to make it relevant. And so this is a conversation that needs to be had. There are many sides to the question. There are many issues to be decided. But in the meantime, just because we have corporations involved in campaign finance, that's not an excuse for mediocrity at the local, state, county, or federal level. We need to work together as good public servants and solve the problems of the people that elected us. And I've always been that kind of a guy. So, we'll see how the future unrolls.
One of the last things we'll talk about, and this gets back to you being a New Yorker. If you look at the New York City mayoral race and just the way that elections are done in New York City, for all its flaws, it really has it almost to a science now in terms of the way it should be done throughout the country. You've got matching funds 8 times the dollar, which is amazing for grassroots candidates. And they now have ranked choice voting, where you have the opportunity to really see who is fighting on your behalf for the issues that matter most to you. And even if, as you suggested, you can't get the whole loaf, you might be able to get something that's at least close to it by looking at the second and third or even fourth options. I really think expanding those ideas to other parts of the country, especially down here, I think would be very, very helpful. We almost passed jungle primaries with the ballot initiative last election. How would you feel about potentially something like that going forward, like ranked choice voting? And if there was a way to potentially have, as Andrew Yang, who's running for New York City mayor, has suggested, democracy dollars or an aid to having publicly financed elections.
I'm very thankful that in 1996, my wife and I moved to Florida. I was born in Cuba, but I grew up in New York City, and I loved living in New York City, and a big part of me will always be proud of that upbringing. But Florida is a very different place. It's beautiful and it's open. It's the quality of life here is really on the eastern seaboard of the United States. It's incomparable. Frankly, I don't know that I'd ever move out of Florida. But Florida is a peninsula, and unlike New York City, it's not affected by neighbors. We are an island, essentially, and so people here, in order to adopt an idea, you have to convince them. You have to talk to them. There has to be, and we're also tough to talk to because we're not a pedestrian environment. People are in their cars. We chose to spread out rather than grow up, go vertical. So we're more like LA in that respect, and other places that are sort of sprawled out. So there are a lot of communications challenges that are involved. But I think Floridians also realize that somewhere we sort of realize that there's very little, for example, in South Florida that's even 100 years old. We are pioneers here. We are in the first iteration of South Florida, and let's just take a second to celebrate who we are. If you take just on the numbers, Peter, think about this. If you take the population of Miami-Dade County and add Broward and add Palm Beach, okay, you've got over 6 million people.
Wow.
That is the second largest tri-county area on the eastern seaboard of the United States.
New York City's number one. We're two. Yeah. And overpopulation is a problem.
People will say, well, what about Boston? Not even close. They have 1 million people there. Well, what about Philly? Not even close. 1 million people there. We are the second largest tri-county area on the eastern seaboard of the United States. This is big business, and we're an international place.
Oh yeah.
We are a nascent community by New York City standards. New York was incorporated, I think it was 1622.
Right.
So we're just getting started here. This is we're on our first layer of we're still completing Pembroke Road.
I remember when that kind of got big. My grandmother moved into Century Village when it was built, and I remember going with her to right now it's where the models used to be, and actually it was right by the original guard gate, which is now not the guard gate anymore. But so like I remember, I'm a second generation native. My dad was born in Miami, so I kind of remember how fast this has been for Pines. Like it's like in the universe, it's young.
Yeah. Our city is only 61 years old as an incorporated city. So there's a lot for us to discover. And when I look at the crop of young leaders that are coming up who are increasingly taking the mantle of positions of authority, I am very, very enthused because I see in them a sort of steadiness of sort of a determination to do better, and it gives me a lot of hope. Even though the current situation is so difficult, and it has been so difficult as I've described, certainly since 9/11 over the last 20 years or so. They give me a lot of hope, and I think good things are coming, and people should not sort of throw their arms up and say, "Oh, I give up." These are the most exciting times, the most interesting times that we've ever had in a lot of different ways, and I am very, very optimistic about the future of our region, of our state, of our county, and ultimately of our country, because we've got very, very bright folks coming up, a lot brighter than we were in my time. And they have. Yeah,
I've met your daughter. She's brighter. I've met your daughter. She's brighter. I could see it.
Definitely brighter, and she has better tools. She has better tools.
Yeah.
This conversation has flowed probably as well as anyone.
Well, because Angelo is a guy. He's one of our guys. He's a friend. He's local.
It is a perfect segue into how we always conclude our podcast interviews. And the question, of course, is what does generational change mean to you?
Generational change. What do you mean by that? I'm missing
the idea of turning politics.
Oh, is this a connection on Jen's name? Is that what?
Oh yes. Well, but the whole idea, the whole concept.
But what is generational change with a G? What does that mean? Because it's sort of this idea of the transition of a society from one generation to the next. And it's like, what does that look like where we are right now?
Because as you just alluded to,
Well, I'll tell you what it was for my group. So we're the sons and daughters of the World War II era people. Some of them the the Korean War folks, and they were the sons and daughters or the children of the Great Depression. Their earliest experiences were disease and extreme poverty, but there was an ethic of staying together. So you may not have had much going on, but if the neighbor knocked on your door, you invited them in because they were your neighbor, and that's what you were expected to do. And there was also an element of faith that doesn't have to be replaced with faith, though it could. But here's the ticket. So how do I explain this? Okay, let me just blurt it out, and you tell me if it makes sense to you. So our society, unlike other authoritarian societies around the world, depends on most of us voluntarily agreeing to obey the laws. Okay, we don't have like in other nations people looking over our shoulders forcing us to obey the law. We catch the exceptions. That's how we're set up. That's very different. It's almost sublime. It's so easy to overlook it, but this notion of most of us, most of the time, voluntarily agreeing to obey the laws wasn't just a question of personal ethics or personal patriotism. It was also a reflection of our faith. And so as we get into an era in which faith is playing less and less of a role, what institutions will surge forward to replace the one that we lost that keeps us on the path of voluntarily agreeing to obey the laws? Now, there might be others, but I think that's one of the major challenges of the generation coming up, either to renew their faith in traditional institutions, or alternatively to replace it. Otherwise, they will be living with a hole without which a whole bunch of democracy might not add up. These are challenges that you all will have. The other thing is that in probably about 20 years, if this is ever recorded, what we're talking about will be so irrelevant, because the problems that we will be dealing with 20 years from now, and I feel very certain about this, are problems that haven't even been thought of, which will be worked on by folks that haven't yet prepared to solve them using tools and technology that hasn't even yet been invented. That's how quickly things are changing. That wasn't the case in my era. We had advanced tools and we had advanced problems, but the similarity between what the problem-solving approaches and tools that the generation before us had and we had were much closer to what we have now. So you all are going to be dealing with a whole litany of things that you didn't have before. Yeah. And I feel so incredibly enthusiastic about your ability to do that, because you're super smart. Your hearts are in the right place. You want to do the right thing, and you don't want to fail. You want to succeed, and it just gives me such tremendous pride. You know, and I'm talking like I'm some old guy. In my heart, I'm 17, but you know, I have to acknowledge that, you know, sometimes I walk by a mirror and I say, "Who the hell is that?" But that's you know, that's just the way life sort of plays out. I am very, very optimistic. And when I meet people who say, government's for losers, and they don't know what, there is no greater thing to devote your life to than government. It's just, there's nothing like it. And I'm so fortunate that I got in it, and I'm thankful to both of you for having an interest in it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you talk to us like we're the young people. You know, I'm turning 50 in a couple of weeks, so I'm closer to you than I am to him. Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that we do have representation like you, that regardless of where you stand, you brought up a really great point. You separate your partisan beliefs for representation of people as a whole.
Yeah.
Running in a nonpartisan race is a lost art because it allows you to answer to the people and not to a political party, even if you belong to one of the two major parties. And that is something that we are really advocating for, because it's what ultimately divides us more than anything else. But the way you handle yourself, the way that you answer to your constituents, everything, bringing the whole conversation this evening full circle, it begins and ends with local politics. If you are engaged at the local level, you can be that much more prepared and engaged at the state and federal level. Most people jump way too high, way too fast. They need to focus on the things that happen in their own backyard.
And those are the things that affect your life on a daily basis. That's 100%. The thing that people don't understand. It's not the big issues, but it's the things that affect your life on a daily basis are handled locally. And I don't think, people really pay attention to that when it should be their primary focus.
Well, you've given us the opportunity, because we all know there's a myriad of issues that exist. Myriad. I can't say that word right. There's a lot of, just like I can't say water.
But you like it, and you keep saying it, but you say it wrong. It's myriad.
I can't say water. I can't say talk. It's the way
those are fine.
Yeah, well, no, because it's the accent.
Whatever.
But, whatever. The bottom line is, we're very grateful that you did come on tonight, and we are definitely going to look into this primary issue of what can we do to help mitigate this issue of getting road. Pembroke Road extended
We're
to
going to promote that, and we're going to have people be calling their commissioners and harping on it.
Yeah.
We could be very annoying.
In a good way. In a good way.
That's what government is supposed. We are supposed to work for the people, not the other way around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And when we're not doing that, that's a call to change.
Okay.
We definitely look forward to seeing you again, having you on. Stop by and say hello on Jen's birthday, May 13th.
We'll send you an invitation for sure.
Say hi to Lisa and the family. It's always a pleasure.
It's an online cocktail party. We're going to have some special guests. We'll have a little bit of some performances. It's a fundraiser for GenCorps.
Yeah.
We do, we beach cleanup. We do food distributions. We're doing homeless bags.
And you know what? Great final point, because I did want to mention this, Angelo. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. One of the initiatives that we are really focused on at the local level, I don't know what we can do in Pembroke Pines.
Yes.
But we are really into building community gardens. And if you haven't seen what we've started, we have one in Hollywood, and it's being relocated
because we're being basically gentrified.
Yeah. And so the focus is to be able to grow organic fruits and vegetables, do composting, and do potentially bee colonies as well.
Well, this is also about having people do vegetation on their homes, on their front lawns, and having a group of volunteers that'll service those gardens for them. They get a cut of whatever's growing on their front lawn, and then the rest of it goes into the community. And so it's basically this idea of fleet farming. And that's what we're working on right now. We have a couple of places in Hollywood that are going to be like our kickoff for this. But that's one of the things that we're doing in promoting healthy eating and sustainability.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great thing to do.
Yeah. So see, you would be supportive of that.
Kids love it. Seniors love it.
Yeah.
We've had community gardens in the past. They tend to be, I don't know why, they tend to hang around for a little while and then disappear. But I'd like to see more of that going on. There's a beautiful one at the Southwest Focal Point that's been there for a long time.
Those are the ones that are municipal related, and they're affiliated with the city. And so this is more of
just school activity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we want to do it also as a diversion program for youth offenders at the elementary and middle school level.
That takes me back.
Yeah.
That takes me back. I remember a diversion program when I was in college, and I was a site supervisor for the Summer Youth Employment Program, and I think it was all the way out in Staten Island, and they had an acre or so and they had these hardened kids out there working with this fella who understood the dirt and understood how to grow things. And they would just melt in the sun doing work, but they become someone else as these plants grew up. There was a connection to nature that these inner city kids did not have, and it made a big. I remember feeling it and seeing it as I spoke to them. It made a big difference in their lives.
Yeah, there's something about digging in the dirt for people and being part of that process that is
working with animals, all of that. Yeah,
yep.
All of that is very therapeutic.
Thank you so much, Angelo. So when we start that, we're coming to you. We're going to come to
we'll
you
definitely
in Pine.
keep you posted. And obviously, it's been a real pleasure. Like I said, say hi to the family. We will definitely be in touch.
Thanks, Angelo.
Take care.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.